Hey, this is Elijah with the Oxygen team, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to create a new element for Oxygen using Oxygen's Elements API. Fair warning, this is going to be a code-heavy tutorial because the Elements API uses primarily HTML, CSS, and PHP. The Elements API has been around for a while, and we've used it internally for elements like the Pro menu, shape dividers, and all of the Oxygen WooCommerce elements. There are also a ton of third-party add-ons using the Elements API to add new elements to Oxygen. Unfortunately, we don't yet have full public documentation, so this video will act as a quick guide on getting started developing elements for Oxygen. So I've got a local WordPress install here, and if I jump over to Visual Studio Code, I have the plugins folder from that WordPress site pulled up in my workspace. That means I've got access to the Oxygen plugin and the Oxygen WooCommerce plugin, which makes it easy for me to search and reference the existing API elements if I need to take a look at how something's done elsewhere. And then to build my own elements, I've got a little boilerplate plugin here with a simple plugin.php file that checks to make sure Oxygen's active and then grabs all the element files from the elements folder. And I've got a couple of example elements here. We'll start with just the base example element, which has all the basic stuff we need to register an element. But first, before we start building, we need to decide what we're going to build. Now, to keep this simple, I'm going to build a card element, which I found on Cody House, and it looks nice. It's got a little bit of a hover effect, a link, an icon, heading, and text. So this will give us a good little workout in creating an element in Oxygen. So we'll use this as reference throughout this video. To get started, we first need to go over here and make a copy of our example element. So I've just copied and pasted that, and I'm going to rename it. And we'll name it my card element.php. And then we need a CSS file with the same name. So we'll say new file here, and we'll do my.card.element.css. This is where all our default CSS will live. Now let's jump back over to the myCardElement.php file, and we need to change a couple of things here. First, this class needs to be card element. The name needs to be card. And then we need a unique slug, so my-card-element. And then if we scroll all the way down, we need to go ahead and change this class name to, we'll call it card element. So there's our basic setup. The element will now be available in Oxygen to use, but when we insert it, all we'll get is a basic div with some text. So what we need to do is go ahead and create our markup for this element. So let's get rid of this and just start from scratch. So we'll do div class equals my-card. And then within that, we're going to need a couple of things. We need an icon, some title text, some description text, and a link. So we can do a placeholder for the icon, because we'll have to come back and change this a little bit later. Then we'll do a paragraph for the title text. We'll probably add a class to that in a little bit. And then a paragraph for the description text here. And then an A element. We'll give it a href of nothing for now. And that's our basic markup. So now if we go into Oxygen and we refresh the builder, now that we've registered this new element, we can go ahead and click add, and we'll find it under other, unless we've specified that it goes somewhere else, and we can drop in the card. And you can see that we now have that basic markup that we defined. Let's save that, and let's jump over here and add a couple of classes. Let's call this my-card title, and then we'll call this my-card description, and this one will be my-card link, and then we'll just change this class here, my-card icon. All right, so the first thing we need to do here is add some default styling. But because we need an icon here, I want to go ahead and get that out of the way because using icons in API elements is a little bit more involved than some of the other controls. So let's go ahead and knock that out first. First, we need to go down to the controls function here. And this is where we can go ahead and define all our controls. First, I'm going to go ahead and comment out all of the example controls so that they're kind of out of the way, but we can still reference them if we'd like. Now let's start fresh up here. So to register a control, we can either add the control directly to the element's primary tab in the properties pane by saying $this and then adding the control, or we can declare control sections so that we have subsections of controls. In this case, we want to add the control directly to the properties pane. So this is going to be an option control. So we do add option control. And then we need to pass in an array with a few different items. So let's make an array, and then we'll tell it what type the control is going to be. And this is going to be icon_finder. Then we need to tell it what the name of the control is. This is the name that's actually used in the builder. So we'll say icon. And then we need a unique slug for this control because we'll be able to access this control's value later in our render function. So let's go ahead and give it a slug of icon. And then we can give it a default like font awesome icon-arrow-circle-o-down, something like that. There's a lot of different defaults you could choose from. We'll just go with that. Now we want to tell Oxygen to rebuild this element when this control's value changes. So we do a little arrow here and say rebuild element on change. Let's save that. And we could go up to our render function and start using this control's value in our render function. So here above our markup, we want to do a couple of things. We're going to set up an icon variable, and it's checking if this option is set. So is set options icon. And if it is, we're going to go ahead and escape attributes, options, icon. If it's not set, we're going to return nothing. Then we're also going to need to tell Oxygen that we're loading an SVG icon from one of the built-in icon sets. So we're going to make sure we have access to our global Oxygen SVG icons to load variable. Then we're going to add our icon to that. So Oxygen SVG icons to load equals icon. Now we can go down here, and instead of this div, we can actually output an SVG element. We could wrap it in a div if we want to, but I don't know that it'll be necessary here. So SVG class equals my-card icon viewbox. We'll give it, I don't know, 0, 0, 25, 28. And then within that, we're going to say use xlink ref equals pound. And then we're going to echo the icon value within that. And then close that up and then close the use up. Now, theoretically, this should work, but when I'm creating these things, I like to go ahead and make sure I haven't made any mistakes, just like this. The icon variable needs to have an equal sign there to set the value. And then let's go ahead and save and refresh. Oh, and actually we have a missing parentheses here. So let's add that in and then get rid of this one here. And that should clear all that up. Now it should work how we intended. So let's refresh the builder. And now we have an icon. That's super cool. Can we change it? We can change it. Perfect. So the icon obviously is unstyled, but it is outputting the icon, and we have our icon chooser control over here. Now let's go over and just give that element some basic styles. So we have a few classes here: myCard, icon, title, description, link. So what we can do is go over to the myCard element.css and we add some default styles. So we'll do my-card, my-card __ icon, my-card __ title, my-card __ description, and then the final one is going to be the link, my-card __ link. But for now, let's give the icon a width of 32 pixels. Let's make sure that goes ahead and wrangles that icon into shape. And just like that, we now have a sensible default style for that. So let's jump over here and just get a little crazy and go ahead and do some styling. So my card, we're going to give it a default padding of, I don't know, 32 pixels. Background color white. And then we're going to give it a border radius, 8 pixels. And then we're going to use a little bit of trickery here, my-card, star plus star. And we're going to do margin top, 8 pixels. This is going to be our spacing between elements by default. So this just tells us any element that follows another element within my card should have margin top of whatever we define here. That's pretty cool. Card title, we're going to set the font size to 22 pixels, font weight 600, and then the description probably doesn't need anything, but the link probably will. We kind of want it to be kind of located off to the right, so I think we can just do a margin left auto on that. Let's refresh and see what our default styles are looking like. So you can't quite see it yet, but we have a little something going here. Let's go ahead. Anytime I'm not sure about what CSS to use, I always jump up to the front and use DevTools to figure it out. So let's see how we're going to get this aligned over to the right. So I did margin left auto, which didn't do anything, probably because, let's see, display block. Let's go ahead and set the card. I think we'll probably have to set this to display flex direction column. There we go. And then that will work for the link, the settings that we chose. Now, the other thing is the paragraph elements have some default spacing, this margin block start, margin block end. I want to reset that. So we're going to do my card and P elements, paragraph elements, and margin block start, 0 pixels, margin block end, 0 pixels, because we only want the spacing that we tell it to have. So we've got that handled. We also need to set the my card to display flex direction column. And then let's go into Oxygen here. And now that we've added some different styles, we'll refresh. And let's go ahead and set a background color on this so that we can see our card. Perfect. Now you can see our spacing is a little more sensible here. Our link is off to the right. So we've made good progress already. Let's go ahead and throw some lipsum in that description to make sure our styling all works how we think it will. And I'm just using a text expander shortcut to drop in some text here, which that's probably way too much. So we'll drop that back a little bit. And let's jump over here and refresh. All right, so now we see that the card has a bit of a width problem, but that really depends on how you're using the card, because we can define the width of the card in Oxygen's advanced controls without even adding any controls ourselves. So we could go in here and go to advanced size and spacing. We could set the max width, for instance, to like 200 pixels or something. That would be fine. But now we want to start adding some styling controls, right? Let's start with some typography controls for the title, description, and the link. But first, let's throw our icon control in a control section because it's going to get a little messy here in a minute. So what we can do is we can create an icon section variable, and that equals this add control section, which then we need to pass in the slug, so icon section, the name, we'll call it icon, and then we'll pass in a default icon for this section. You can pass in a custom icon if you want. And then finally reference this. So that adds a new section, and then we can put these controls in this section. So we can do, instead of this, we can do icon section. So then what that does is if we refresh here, now when we select this element, instead of that control being right there on the primary tab of the properties pane, it's now nested under a section. And because we're going to add some size controls and color controls for this icon, we definitely want that in its own section. Now we can go in and add some typography controls. So we need to do this, and then Oxygen's API does have some handy presets. So we're going to do typography section, And we can go down here in the example element and find a typography section. And this tells us we need to pass in the name, the selector that these controls should target, and then this as a reference. We can do that really quickly. So we'll go down and do a name. And we'll call this title. And then the selector is going to be my card __ title. And then this. And then we want that for all of our typographical elements. So we can just paste that 3 times. And we'll call this one description. And this one link. So let's make sure we're not missing any semicolons there. Good thing those red squiggly lines let me know, or else we would have had a big error here. So let's refresh. And actually one more thing I need to do is to change these selectors. So this is going to be description instead of title, and this is going to be link instead of title. So that should get us what we want. Let's refresh one more time. And if we click our element, we now have control sections for each of those. Now, theoretically, if we didn't mess anything up, if we click our title section and start changing things, we should be actually changing the output CSS. So now we can change the font size, font weight, text align, everything of this title element. Same for description. We can change the color to red or green or purple or whatever. And then the same for link. If we go down here, we should be able to change the link color, all that fun stuff. So we now have control over the typographical parts of this element. Let's go into our icon section and let's add a color control and a width control. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we know how to change the color of this icon, because it is an SVG and they can be a little goofy. But I think if we change the color of the My Card icon element, it will change the color of the SVG. So let's do red. And see, that didn't work. So I'm glad I didn't go ahead and do the control in the way that I assumed it would work. Let's try changing it here. Fill red. There we go, it's fill. So we might be able to do that here too. I'm not sure if the fill will be inherited down to the use element. Let's uncheck that. Yeah, so we can just set it, the fill on my card icon. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to add a style control to our icon section. And we want it above our icon selector. So let's just go right above where we declared our icon selector, and let's do icon section, add style control. Now style controls are a little different because they're mapped directly to CSS properties. So what we do with a style control, if we scroll down, we can find a good example here. We pass in an array with the name, selector, property, and control type. Unit if we are using a unit, but we're not going to use a unit for the color. So I'm going to copy that and we'll paste that in here. Then let's uncomment it and change the things we need to change. So the name is going to be color, and then we're going to change the selector to my card icon, and then the property is going to be fill. So this just automatically outputs the CSS based on the property that we're passing to it. And then the control type is, in fact, color picker. So that should do the trick. Make sure we have our semicolons all sorted out. And then let's jump over here and give that a test. So if we go into here, click the card, go into the icon section, we now have a color picker. And as we drag that around, you can see that we're actually changing the color of our icon element. Perfect. And we can change the icon itself. The last thing we want to do is change the width of the icon element. So let's put this above everything else. And we're just going to copy and paste because we need another style control. And we're going to say width. And we're targeting the same selector, but this time we're going to do width. And this time we're going to use a measure box. And now we do need the unit control here. And this is going to be pixels. So now let's refresh again. We can see here if we click our element and if we've done everything correctly, we can change the width of the element. Let's try 100 pixels, etc. We can adjust it, and then it goes back to our default if nothing's defined. So if we want like 42 pixels instead, we can do that. Let's make it 42 pixels and red and change it to a heart. And let's save that. If we jump up to the front end, you can see now that we've got a nice little card with a custom heart icon, a title, description, and a link. Now, We might also want to define the link URL. So what we're going to do is add it to this preset section. The only problem with that is it is going to go at the bottom. So we could put it somewhere else if we wanted, or we can nest the sections and have link, which would contain the URL. And then we could also have a link typography section under that, which might not be a terrible idea. So let's go ahead and add a section here. Right before link, we're gonna do this, and we'll go up and just copy and paste this. When you're learning these things, it's definitely a good idea to retype more than copy and paste. But for this video, because I don't want it to take forever, I'm going to use the code that we already have. And we're gonna call this link section. The name is gonna be link. Of course, we need to give this control section a name, so we'll call it link section equals. And then what we're going to do is this typography section that we added, we're going to actually add it to link section. But then above that, we want to add an option control. So link section, add option control. And we need an array here, so we're going to go array, type. We'll just do a text field for now. Name is going to be link URL. Slug is going to be link underscore URL. And then default is going to be oxygenbuilder.com. So again, make sure you don't have any major syntax errors, which your code editor will generally let you know. And then we can refresh and make sure our controls are all arranged how we want them to be. Click that, go to link. We now have a link URL, and then another section here. We actually need to rename that to link typography to make it a little more clear. And then we can plug in a link URL here. Now, what I want to do is I want to only output the link in the markup if there is a link to be output. So what we can do is open up our PHP here and do if options link underscore URL, which is that slug that we defined. Then we can go ahead and close out the PHP, put this little guy in there, then reopen the PHP. And then we need to close our PHP tag there too. So now if we have a link URL, it should output the link. Otherwise, if it's blank, it shouldn't output it. Now we might need to, finesse this logic a little bit because I think it might return a blank string, which may still pass this check. Let's just try it real quick. We'll go ahead and refresh. Now, because we have a default link, I expect it to be output. But if we erase that and then save and look on the front end, yeah, we're going to have to update that logic. So let's say and options link URL does not equal a blank string. Just for fun, let's throw in and options link URL does not equal the default, which would be HTTPS Oxygen Builder. Maybe it's passing that default even when we don't have it defined. So let's go ahead and refresh and check that out. And that looks like it probably did it. Let's go to link. So we have the default. Now, if we go ahead and add a different link like facebook.com and apply params, we now have our link. So now we have this link conditionally appearing based on whether it's actually been designated or not, which is super nice. When you're building elements, and it's nice to have them kind of intelligent as far as what they're displaying. Now we need to actually output that link in the href attribute. So we're going to do PHP echo, and actually we can do this kind of shorthand. Options link URL and close our PHP tag. So now we should be getting a link that points to facebook.com, and it does if we look down at the bottom corner of the browser. So that gives us that. Now we can change the width here, so we don't need to add any controls. We can change the width to like, I don't know, 250 pixels or something like that. One final thing we might want to do is give the ability to control the border radius. So we're going to add another section here called card. which will be like the container. So let's go down here to controls, and we will add a section above this icon section. We'll call it card section equals this, add controls section, card section, card assets icon.png, which is just the default, and then $ this. And then within that, let's go ahead and add another preset. So card section, and I believe it's called border section. Let's see, I have it here in the example element. It is. Let's copy and paste that to save a little bit of time here and make sure we don't make any mistakes. And then go down here and change the name to card border, and then the selector will be my card. Now, if we save and refresh, we should now be able to go to card border, and we can set the borders and stuff, but I'm mostly interested in being able to set the border radius so we can make it bigger than the default or 0 or whatever. So that's pretty cool. That gives us a little bit more control over the look of the card. And now that we have most of the controls we want, the only final thing we might want to add is like a padding, because it's 32 pixels all the way around by default, but we might want to be able to customize that. So we can do that with a pretty simple input. So we'll do card section, add style, control, array, name is going to be padding, selector will be the my card class, property is going to be padding, control type will do another measure box, and unit will be pixels. So that should give us the ability then to control the padding all the way around our card. And with some elements, it's better to give maybe less control in the interest of simplicity. So let's select the card element, card, and instead of having like all of our paddings available, we can do like 32 pixels, which is the default, or we can do 10, etc. So that gives us enough control to customize this card element. And one final thing that we probably should put in here is the ability to change the content in the card. We can already change the link itself, which is fine, but we want to be able to change the title text, the description text, and the link text. So these controls I'm going to throw straight into the primary tab, and let's jump over to our code editor and put those in. So above all of our sections and everything else, we can start adding these controls. So first, we're going to add one for the title text. So we're going to do this, add option control, and that's going to be an array here, and we're going to give it a name, type, slug, and default. Let's just copy this whole array here and use that. Let's do that, paste it in, and we'll rename this. The type is going to be text field. The name is going to be title. The slug is going to be title underscore text. And then we can put in a default here, which will be card title. Now we need to use this in our render function up here. So instead of just outputting title text, we will echo options and then pass in the slug of the control we just made, title underscore text. And now it will use the text from that control as the card title. And to make that work for these other elements, we just need to do the same exact thing a couple of times. So let's copy and paste that, and we'll give this one a type of text area, and then we'll call it description, and then we'll name the slug description text, and then the default will be card description goes here. And then finally, we need our link text to be customizable. So we'll copy and paste again, and we'll change this back to a text field, change the name to link text. The slug will be link text as well, and then we will set the default to more details. Now we just need to use these again in our render function up here, just like we did for our title text. So we can actually copy and paste that little bit. And then we'll just change that slug out to use the content from the given control field. So this is description text. And then here we need to do the link underscore text control. So let's drop that in and change that slug to link underscore text. Now, if we go back over to our element and refresh, and then we click on our card, we can see our new fields here. So we're going to change the card title to I love oxygen. And then we're going to change the description to a bit of lorem ipsum. And we'll trim that down a bit, of course. And then we can change our link text to visit site. And as you can see, we're now editing the content of this element. So the way you handle this content really depends on what you're rendering. If it is stuff that people need to edit directly, you can put the controls over in the properties pane. Otherwise, a lot of times you're going to be rendering out things from plugins like WooCommerce or Forms or whatever, and then providing styling controls over in the properties pane. So you're not usually doing a lot of content editing in the properties pane. And the more you use this and kind of start tweaking, you might decide that you need some more controls. There are some limitations to the API, but for the most part, as you've seen here, most of the common things that you need to add as a control for an element are pretty simple to add. And if you wanted to do something more advanced, it's probably possible as well, but you may have to reference either an example element, one of the WooCommerce elements, or the Pro Menu or Shape Divider from Oxygen. But the nice thing is if you pull all these folders up in your code editor, it's easy to search for API-related terms and see how other elements are using them. So that's a quick, basic overview of how to create an element in Oxygen using the Elements API. I'll have the boilerplate plugin with the example element available in the description of this video. Again, this is Elijah with the Oxygen team, and thank you very much for watching.